Hi, happy Friday and welcome to the Johnny Jenkins Show. My name, of course, is Johnny Jenkins and I'm with you until 4 o'clock today here on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube as a video, as a live stream. Maybe you're watching after that time. If so, hello to you. I hope you're having a nice morning, afternoon or evening. Also, we're a podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, you can find it. So if you're listening on Spotify or an Apple podcast or wherever, hello to you as well. It's great to have your company today. Now, it's a big one today, this afternoon. We've got an hour really to fill of so much discussion. And I'm going to have a panel join me very shortly. They're going to discuss through some of the hot topics of the week. One of them being Marcus Rashford and free school meals. Now, this was an issue we discussed in the summer, or maybe before the summer, about the summer holidays and would people who get free school meals in term time get them in the holidays? Well, actually, now we're talking about half term, which for many is very soon. Marcus Rashford seems to be really up against Boris Johnson here. Last time they had this discussion about free school meals for kids that really don't have much to eat over the holidays, Boris Johnson caved in. It seems like he won't this time, but we'll get on to that a bit later in the show. Also, more places go into regional lockdown, including Coventry, where the University of Warwick is based. And of course, this show is for Raw 12:51 AM, the Warwick student radio station. More and more places in these regional lockdowns. Is it time to just call it quits and go into a national lockdown? Or is that not fair on people in Cornwall, for example, or Norfolk, who have lower coronavirus rates? We discuss that later on. Plus, are we going to get a Brexit deal? The B word is back, and Michel Barnier, the EU chief negotiator, is in town. Is he going to sit down with the government and achieve a Brexit deal? We'll wait and see. But first on the agenda today is Black History Month. It's a very, very important discussion to have, and we've been having discussions about this at Raw throughout October, and this week, Raw News sat down with the women's officer at the Student Union, the co-ethnic minorities officer, and someone from Warwick Anti-Racism Society to have this discussion. So earlier this week, we had this chat, and I can play it to you now.
Across campus, online, and on 12:51 AM. This is your student radio station.
Hi there, welcome to this Black History Month special with Raw News, your student radio station on campus for the University of Warwick. If you're new to Warwick, you're new to Raw, you can get involved by finding us on social media, and we'd really love to see you there and for you to get involved with the brilliant radio station that we have on campus. Today we're discussing Black History Month, and I've got an array of guests to talk to me about the month, why it's important, what's happening this month, and how this blended and online university approach is working. So 3 panelists, we're going to introduce them, bring them on screen and really let them introduce themselves in their own words. Here we are. Hello, who are you? What's your role? And what does Black History Month mean to you?
Hi, so my name is Amara Precious, Amara for short. I'm Warwick SU's Women's Officer, but I'm also exec on Warwick Anti-Racism Society, and I'm the BAME Officer on Warwick Anti-Sexism Society. So for me personally, Black History Month is the appreciation and celebration of Black people. It's the highlighting of what should already be in the forefront of all of our minds, that Black people have for history been at the forefront of a lot of organizing and a lot of resistant work and struggle work as well. So for me, Black History Month is just putting everything more that we should already know, but heighten it in that 1 month.
It's a very important month to you, and I'm sure it is to our next guest, Rachel, as well. Hi, Rachel. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what Black History Month means to you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. I am the co-ethnic minorities officer in the SU, and I'm also part of the organising group, so Warsaw Exec. And I guess I'm also a third-year history student, so Black History Month to me is really just an opportunity for me to talk about how much history I want to, because I'm a history geek. But I think just in general, Black History Month is just an opportunity for people to learn about Black history and for people to kind of fill in the gaps, because I do think the British education system isn't particularly the best at informing people of Black history and just the legacy of the work that Black people are doing worldwide. So yeah, that's what Black History Month brings to me.
And we'll get on to the education and the curriculum really in a moment, but we've got one more person to meet. Hello, welcome to the stream. Who are you and what does Black History Month mean to you?
Hi, I'm Tomi. I'm a PPE student, and I'm also on the Warsaw Exec. I think, like Black History Month for me is just a time to celebrate Black people, Blackness, and I guess sort of resist like the sidelining, marginalization of our narratives, experiences, histories. That's mainly it, really. Yeah.
Welcome. It's great to have you. Rachel, I want to start with a point you mentioned there about the curriculum, the education system, and this really stretches all the way from schools to universities, I suppose, is that really white history is what they call in schools history, and Black history is seen as something that's separate. It's not seen as one. This is a big problem.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like, just thinking back to when I was in secondary school, I think the main thing that we learned about Black history was slavery. And then it was when I decided to do GCSE. Even GCSE didn't really cover it that much. It was also just like American history. But it was as I kind of went up in education that I was learning more about Black history, which I don't think is particularly good, because if I wasn't so passionate about history, I would still want to know the basics. I still want to know, like the Bristol. I think just in general, the British education system hasn't been particularly good at that.
So we're hearing there about the education system, particularly in secondary school. But what about university, Rachel? Is that as diverse in its teachings as it should be?
I would say not really. I think in first year, this is just like from my experiences, in first year, there was a module on the history of Africa from 1800 up until now, which is like amazing to hear. But I think just a history of Africa in itself is very broad, and for the timeline is very broad. It's like there's not really a specific focus on a specific Black history. I do think the history department are trying. I've had many talks with them about how to improve the range of history that is taught. I do think there could be like a lot more done. And Black history isn't only about teaching Black history, if that makes sense. It's also about ensuring that there is representation in all departments. So that's also something to think about during Black History Month as well.
And Amara, I'd like to come to you as someone who's involved with anti-racism and anti-sexism on campus, two big organising forces when it comes to Warwick. Perhaps you could tell somebody maybe is new to the university or new to sort of activism at university, what does Black activism look like at Warwick?
So at Warwick, Black activism takes many shapes and many forms, but it's always one where we are always standing in solidarity with other groups or we're fighting for ourselves. So I think a lot of things that comes to mind is, and a lot of people who are here actually involved with this, is French striking, where we have a lot of Black students who are the forefront of French strikes. We then also have the occupation of the SU, which had occurred last year in November, actually last year around this time of month. And we had a lot of Black students who stood in solidarity with Palestinian students and were calling for the SU to change its colonial and racist ways. And then we have Black students standing in support of one another when it comes to the releasing of the Black students' demands, where we are actually taking a bunch of demands to the university and saying this is how you need to improve the university in order for it to be a helpful and safe space for your Black students. And then you have the addition of Black students at the background of the societies of Warwick Anti-Racism and Warwick Anti-Sexism and other liberation societies, where they table our beliefs about the online teaching and how it's the safest option for students at Warwick.
And online teaching is something we'll get to in a little while, but really you gave us a flavour of the sort of things that people may have seen over the past years, may expect to see over the coming years. Tomi, I wonder maybe if you have a slightly different or just a more personal view for you about what Black activism looks like on campus.
I mean, yeah, I think when Amara said Black students stand in solidarity with other groups, but also fight for ourselves, I think that's probably the best way to capture it. And that's been my own experiences over the last year that I've been here, just understanding like the intersectionality between different forms of oppression that different groups face. And there's Black students which are at the forefront of fighting that in almost every case. So yeah, I would also say that in a lot of cases, it's not a lot of Black students doing all this work. It can be quite focused on people who are quite heavily involved in activism, but nonetheless largely black activists are sort of leading the way at Warwick.
And there was a campaign a month or two ago, Rename Radcliffe, about the background of this building on campus and the SU officers calling for the building to be renamed. Amara, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about this and why you were in support of it.
That's fine. I think Rachel, as ethnic minorities officer, as well as Naz, co-ethnic minorities officer, they brought this to our attention. But the Rename Radcliffe campaign is one which has existed in many different demands over the few years. And so it first came to light in the Work Occupy demands to the university, then was echoed in the Black students' demands to the university, and then is a standalone campaign which is supported and launched by the SU. And so as a very summarized summary of the campaign, it's just calling to rename a building that honors and celebrates a man who was responsible for the deaths and like murder of so many people. And we're saying to our university, you shouldn't put the names of people who have committed very violent actions and actually have us walk through those buildings. So that's why I'm in support of it, because I don't believe in the glorifying and the praising of violent individuals. If you've committed atrocities, then you shouldn't be remembered.
And Rachel, why was this something that for you that you decided to bring to the attention of other student union officers?
Yeah, I think it's, as Amara said, it's really just quite sickening when I think of it. Like, there's a building on campus that is there for the glorification of a colonizer, basically. And I think it's just wild to think about. But when we really put it in perspective, especially with like Warwick's kind of advancements in trying to get more Black people and people of colour onto the campus, it does seem kind of ironic that the decision isn't being made to alter and to facilitate those students and to ensure that that campus is safe for them. And I do think just the existence of the Radcliffe building and Radcliffe being the person who drew the partition lines for India, which, as Amara said, caused so many deaths, I think it is really sickening. And Rename Radcliffe was essentially born to acknowledge and to bring to light Warwick's colonial history, or the history of upholding colonialism at Warwick.
And Tomi, what would you say to somebody that maybe is just starting out at university or wants to get more involved with activism and Black activism on campus? How could they do that? Is it mainly organised through societies?
I would say, yeah, the most sensible thing to do if you're a Black student and you want to get involved in activism is probably like join Warsaw, come to our events, get to know people. It's not necessarily a formal thing like Black activism or whatever at Warwick. It's just networks of people who like doing activism and want to stand up for themselves and other people. So I think just get invested and involved in the places where you see people talking about this or doing events on it, speaking about it, and just find ways to engage with those people and see what can be done from there. And I mean, if you're outside of campus, then you can also find other networks in Coventry to do that with.
Amara, as someone who's involved with anti-racism and anti-sexism on campus, there were these demands that were sent to Warwick about how the year ahead is going to work, particularly in the current circumstances of coronavirus and the potential of a second lockdown or a rise in cases across the country. There's a lot of concern about how teaching takes place. Perhaps you could now tell us, Amara, what this letter was about and why these are measures that you support.
Sure. So the letter was written by our liberating societies, so which is Warwick Anti-Racism Society, Warwick Anti-Sexism Society, and Warwick Pride. And the three societies came together to table and also we included a Black society, so Warwick Ghanaian Society as well. And so the four of us actually came together and said, we do not support the university's decision of blended learning. Everything needs to be moved online for the safety of all of our students. However, but more importantly, we have to highlight that COVID, and we've seen it in the news, affects Black and brown and disabled and trans and gay community a lot more than any other body of individuals in the country. And so it is the safest option to move everything online for the safety of the general public, but also more so for those who are more at risk, mainly either because there are lack of facilities, we do not get the same treatment in hospitals and in care as other people. And so that is just the safest option. And the reason why I support it is because you have to think to yourself, if we have blended learning, which member of staff or which student would you like to sacrifice first for my needs or student experience? Because essentially that's what we're doing. We're saying we can have blended learning and people can pick and choose where they whether or not to come to campus, but then those individuals' actions do not occur in isolation. They will still have to socialize with their housemates who may choose to stay indoors, or they would still be putting at risk the members of staff who have to come in and who have no choice because these students have chosen to come on campus. And so the safest option for everyone is move everything online, and those who need to be on campus for labs can come on campus, and everything is safe for them to do so.
There may be some that say at the time that was a bit of an overreaction. It was too extreme. And here we are on campus in the third week, and there's this blended approach of online and in-person learning. Amara, is it working the way it is at the moment?
It's not perfect. We knew it wouldn't be perfect. My frustrations were if the university had actually taken the time to listen to UCU, many students, and the SU, and now called for everything to be moved online, we would be able to now tackle the problems with online learnings that come with it. Instead, the insistence of avoiding us means that we will eventually become completely online as cases continue to rise, as we've seen on campus and everywhere in the entire country. And we won't be prepared for it. If they had actually said, this is the decision we're going to take, and now we're going to perfect it so there is no problems online, then things will be a lot better. So it's not perfect, but one thing I have to note is it's not perfect, but it's keeping people safe and alive, and that should be the most important thing.
And Tomi, I want to talk to you about 8 demands. I'm not going to go through all 8, but 8 demands that were released towards the end of July to the University of Warwick. And the first one is the most striking, I think. We demand the university to adopt a definition of racism. So many people will be surprised that the university doesn't have a definition of racism. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly ironic that Warwick, in their responses to us, claim that they want to be an even more anti-racist university, and kept banging on about how they've got all these new complaints processes that are made for Black students, and they're fighting to decolonize XY, but they can't produce a basic definition on racism. And then when we proposed a definition of racism for them, which actually took a long time to draft, and it had a lot of input from academics and other activists around, and they didn't engage with that at all. So I mean, really, what their lack of engagement with that, honestly, it's a mask-off moment where it really shows that the uni is not really serious about being anti-racist or decolonizing. It just wants to do it essentially for the aesthetics and the financial benefits that branding itself as such can actually bring about, because it doesn't really want to engage with what Black students actually think racism is and how they think it affects them, because ultimately it's going to implicate Warwick as an institution if they actually have a proper definition of racism in far more instances of racism or legacies of colonialism than they'd otherwise like to admit if they just stay ambiguous about the definition of racism. So yeah, I think it's really just a mask-off moment.
It's a very big moment, and I think it's a very poignant moment to leave our conversation on today. Finally then, but before I let you go, if people have listened to what you've said today and maybe they want to get involved with some of the activism that takes place or with the Anti-Racism Society, you can join the society on the SU website, follow you on social media, and that's where you'll find most of the up-to-date information. Well, thank you, Amara, Rachel, Tomi, for joining me and joining Raw News today to talk about Black History Month. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
There we are, very interesting discussion, and you can find all the information on the Anti-Racism Society Facebook and Twitter and Instagram pages. And if you'd like to get involved with Raw and with Raw News, join us as a society through the SU website. Find us on Facebook, join the groups, and we look forward to seeing you very soon.
Across campus, online, and on 12:51 a.m. This is your student radio.
Wow, what a discussion. Thanks ever so much to my panel there for really getting into Black History Month, what it's all about, why it's important, and how it affects the University of Warwick. So we had the one of the co-ethnic minorities officer at Warwick SU, the women's officer, and someone from Warwick Anti-Racism Society. Now, if you've only caught a little bit of that, and maybe you want to watch it again or whatever, then you can just search for Raw News on Facebook, on Twitter, or YouTube, wherever, and the video is there in full, our discussion, which we had earlier this week. Well, here we are. You're watching or listening to the Johnny Jenkins Show live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And we're now into part of the show where we really get into the hot issues of the week. We'll be discussing the sort of things we just heard in that video, all about Black History Month. Why is the curriculum, I think mainly in schools, but as Rachel touched on, universities as well, why is the curriculum so wide? And so this idea that you've got history of sort of white history and then Black history is a separate thing. Why are we here? Why isn't it as one? That's a discussion we have first. Also, Marcus Rashford, the footballer, really, he has made a name for himself this year. Let me tell you that. He had this discussion earlier this year about free school meals for kids during the holidays, put a lot of pressure on the government. Labour agreed with him, many people did, and the government backed down. They changed their mind. This was a few months ago now, but now we're talking about the half-term holiday coming up for many on Monday across England. And Marcus Rashford is saying, what about the kids on free school meals? Who's gonna pay for their food? Are they going to go hungry in the holidays? Unfortunately, Boris Johnson doesn't seem to go along with him this time. He hasn't yet. Anyway, maybe he'll change his mind. We ask, why does it take a footballer to lead this discussion? And who's right in this? Is it Marcus Rashford saying you've spent an awful lot of money so far, you can spend a little bit more? Or is it Boris Johnson saying, well, actually, our national debt has increased by £260 million in the past 6 months. We do not need to spend any more money. That's the discussion we have. Also, more and more of the country and of the UK is in a regional lockdown, maybe even more than half now, as Coventry, where the University of Warwick is based, heads into local lockdown tonight, I think, maybe tomorrow. Is it just time to give up? I know we had discussion before, but every week more places are in regional lockdown. Maybe that furthers the argument even more. Is it time to just give up, have a national lockdown, a few weeks, get it sorted? Wales started its circuit break, its fire break, its short, sharp lockdown today. And maybe we get a Brexit deal. Maybe. Michel Barnier, the EU chief negotiator, is in London talking with the UK side. Are they going to come to some sort of agreement? Or actually, is it no deal like we reported at this time last week? Let's talk to our panel then. We've got 3 wonderful students from the University of Warwick here really to tell us their thoughts. We start by welcoming the head of news at Raw, Enoch Mukungu. Hi, Enoch.
Hi, Johnny.
How are you? You okay?
Oh, yeah, I'm excellent. How are you?
Yeah, good. I really enjoyed the discussion about Black History Month because I think we really sort of got into it, didn't we?
Oh, yeah, it was. I think it was really probably one of my favorite interviews we've ever done. The discussions we've ever done for Raw News. I think it was really. I'm really proud how it all turned out, and I'm really how people are really liking it. So yeah.
And as I mentioned, it's all on the Raw News social media, isn't it?
Yeah, it's on YouTube, Facebook, anywhere you can, any good reputable podcast site. So go there and you'll find it.
Cool. Yeah. If you missed if you didn't catch all of it on the show today, and Enoch, am I right in thinking you have been in the physical Raw studio today, in the actual with the microphones and the
Yes, I returned.
What was it like?
Oh God, it's like seeing an old girlfriend. It was beautiful. I didn't realize how much you can miss the shoddy old desk in Studio 2 and all the ways it doesn't work, but oh God, it really invoked a nostalgic feeling in me. Actually, something I realized is I recorded my first show in Studio 2 and we planned it on the whiteboard, and in all this time no one has wiped it off the whiteboard, so it was still there, my first ever show plan for a Raw show. And it's like, oh God, that was a trip.
Oh wow, a bit of history there. And oh, that's brilliant. Did you get to play with everything and pretend you're doing a radio show?
Oh, yeah. I think I may have kept reorienteering training to give me a chance to pretend I was still doing a radio show as a way of demonstrating how it all worked for all the newbies. But it was a good time. I think we all learned something, so it was good.
Yeah, it's great because you've been training some of the first year students who are new to Warwick, new to Raw, of course. And I suppose anyone that's new to Raw, really, not just first years. And how are they finding it? Were they enjoying it? Oh, can't see much of Enoch.
I think I like to hope that they
hold on, sorry,
I
I thought I lost you there.
Time. Oh
no, come back. It was me. It was me. It wasn't you.
Okay. Yeah, no, it was okay. Right. I like to think they had a good time. I hope it wasn't that bad at teaching them. But we had fun. We played some. I think we had an old playlist up that was just all like 80s hits, and we just kept playing that. It was a great time.
That's brilliant. Well, great to see you today, Enoch, and we'll get chatting in a moment. Let's bring in someone that's brand new to the show. Lily, hello.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. And it's so great you've been able to join us. So, Lily, you're a first year student, right?
Yes, I am. Yes.
And how is it?
I mean, I've spent the first 3 weeks in isolation, basically. So it's been okay, but it's definitely been interesting so far, like when it comes to course material. But I'm glad that now I'm out and can go to in-person stuff. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
So isolation because of coming from another country or just coming into contact?
No, COVID. I had COVID and 10 other people of my flat. So basically all of us had it. And now we are not anymore positive, I think, because it's been 3 weeks. So yeah, but I got it after the first week. So hopefully not again.
And how did it feel? What were the effects on you?
I'd say like the initial symptom was fatigue. I felt extremely exhausted one day. And this was after the first person had lost sense of smell and taste. And then I feel like I got every symptom. So I had a fever one day, and then I had a cough another, and then I lost my sense of smell and taste. But that's really it. And it wasn't that bad, but it wasn't pleasant either. So I wouldn't recommend it, but it's not horrible. Yeah.
I haven't heard anyone recommend it yet.
No.
I suppose it depends all on your age and your fitness and everything. And, we're far more likely to be okay with it, really, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
And what about this? Because some people have had long-term effects, long COVID, it's called, where you might have fatigue for like weeks afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And you getting any of that, or do you feel sort of you've bounced back to normal?
I really was scared of that. I feel like I'm pretty normal. Like I was scared about the taste and smell not coming back because that was the weirdest sensation ever. Like I did not enjoy that at all, but it's slowly coming back already. So that gives me hope that it'll be back to 100%. But otherwise, like I don't feel tired anymore necessarily. So I think I'm good, hopefully.
That's brilliant, because early March, a few weeks before lockdown came in, I got every symptom. I never had the cough actually, but I got everything else, lost the sense of smell and taste, and it was rough. I hated it. But I think the biggest thing for me was the probably 2 months afterwards. I was just so tired all the time, and now I feel back to normal now. But obviously we're 6 months down the line. Many people haven't bounced back or haven't got the taste or the smell back, as you mentioned. And I think that's worse than having the virus itself, isn't it? Because it sort of lingers. Anyway, well, it's great you're well, Lily, and thanks ever so much for being here. And we always love it when we get new people on the show. So we'll get into the discussion in a moment. One more person to say hello to. It's the host of the Alternative View at Raw, Cam Hall. Hello, Cam.
Good afternoon. How are we all doing?
Yeah, we're all good. We're loving life. We're COVID free. At least we think we are. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. It's been quite a manic week with obviously my Raw show, and then you were watching it on Friday, the technology collapsing 45 minutes before, and still dealing with all that. So living up to my reputation of being a massive boomer. But yeah, manic week, but great to appear on the show. I've somehow managed to avoid being on your show, Johnny, for too long, and I think I have to break that duck today.
Well, that's good. I'm very glad you're here. Do you know, I was thinking earlier on, well, Enoch comes on all the time. Obviously, Lily's new to the show, and I thought, has Cam? And I think you have. I think you came on once in the studio back when it was just radio, pre-COVID days, probably a long time ago now. I think you came in once.
I honestly, this year has just ever since lockdown started, I've just almost forgotten everything that happened in those first 2 months now. It's been crazy.
It really has. And Cam, it's great to see you. Great to have you here. And we know he's not the best with technology, so it's good that we can sort of, see you and hear you and everything. It's absolutely fantastic. Right. So we've been talking at the start of the show about Black History Month and why that's so important, and really why the curriculum, maybe at universities, but more so I think in schools and lower down, is just so white. I watched a program recently by Alison Hammond, who's sort of a very bubbly presenter on This Morning, the ITV daytime show, and she explored the curriculum in a very sort of light touch way, and it was so interesting because it really, as she discovered, learning and going into schools and things, it's just such a white curriculum. Enoch, obviously it's obvious for me to come to you first and say, as a Black man, what's been your experience of this?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite, I think clearest memories of history, studying history back in school, it was year 8. We were studying slavery, and we were asked to make a video project about slavery. And for the first time, everyone in that room turned to look at me to pick me as their partner to be in the film, because I was the only black kid in class. So yeah, I think when it comes to Black history in schools, most of the time it really just has come down to there was slavery, it was bad, eventually we got rid of it, and that is it. I think that's just really disappointing.
I mean, I studied history right up until GCSE. So I did, 7 years of high school, 7 years of primary school. And the only Black figure I think I came along, and I'm talking about sort of, a positive Black figure in history who did good, was Mary Seacole. And that is the only person I think I studied at school that wasn't white. And thinking back then, Enoch, and having, I suppose, a bit more context, Will, now, as someone that's older and that's obviously more educated and everything, how do you feel about that? How everyone turned around and looked at you? It's obviously a memory you've kept.
Yeah, I mean, I remember poor young Enoch felt he was so confused and frightened when it happened, because he's like, oh, great, now everyone's staring at me. But now looking back at it, I can just think, God, that was gross. It's gross that that teacher allowed that to happen. It was gross that I was put in that situation. I really should have happened. But because teachers can't control students in that way. Like, there's nothing a teacher could have done to stop it. I think the only real problem I had with it was that every other project, there's always a sense of exclusion, because there's always at least one person who's like, well, why would there be a Black person here? There wasn't any Black people back in Roman times or whatever. And then you're like, well, but I'm also in the class, so I have to be in the video. Whereas the one time everyone's like, yes, Enoch, you can be in the video as long as you play a slave. It's just, oh, wow, I didn't realize how much I had to unpack on this show until I made me bring that up. I feel slightly discombobulated. Oh.
Well, I'm glad you've been able to sort of open up to us a little bit about that, because saying there, no Black people in the Roman times. Now that's not true, because I've watched this Alison Hammond documentary and I've learned it, and I know that is a myth. By the way, we've lost Cam Hall because he's an absolute boomer and he doesn't know how to use technology. So hopefully he'll come back. But that's just not true. But it's not something that's taught. Lily, I want to come to you now and hear your thoughts on this. Do you, as a white person, look at the curriculum that you've studied over the past however many years and think that was all pretty white?
Yes, definitely. Especially since I went to a European school. I'm from Germany. I went to a European school. And obviously the curriculum there is very Eurocentric, which it is in general in the world anyway, I feel. The good thing is that I took history as like an A-level equivalent, and my teacher was very, he thought it was very important that we also look at the negative aspects, obviously, of colonization and looking at what people there themselves said about it. So not just what the English did in India, but seeing what the people in India were feeling and, that stuff, looking more into detail about that. But when it comes to, when I think about what I did in philosophy or in English, mostly it was white writers or white texts. And I would also say that I'm half American, and from talking to my mom, she, for example, told me that slavery was not really talked about in detail at all. I think it's something that's just sort of mentioned, and then it's mostly like a positive view, not a positive view on slavery, but a positive view of the US as a whole. And so I feel like most of the education that I've done or had at school about it was very limited. And it required me to do research on my own to know exactly which figures played a big role and which people of color made an impact. So I feel like at school, definitely very, very white and very Eurocentric for me. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And Cam, I know we lost you for a moment because, well, we don't really need to explain, do we? Your thoughts on this discussion. I'm aware you won't have heard everything that the other two panelists have said, but looking back at your time at school and in learning environments, it's all been pretty white, I assume, for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a town, the population is 95% white. There was only 1 or 2 people of colour in my school. So we didn't really get the opportunity to learn about sort of, you know, the culture of Black people and their impact on history. It's just not something we ever really did. And it's something I think I actually lost a lot out from, I think, because when one of the things I think with the last government and with Michael Gove in particular, when he implemented a lot of the reforms to the GCSEs, I think there was a real emphasis upon this sort of great man view of history and this sort of very British view. So, for example, we took out in the English literature, it was all British novels. And I almost think there was this sense that it was this great man view of history that really didn't focus upon the much wider contribution of people to society. And actually, one of the things I most fondly remember that I just came into my head when we were having this discussion was, for my GCSE English, one of the poems that we looked at was a poem called Checking Out My History. And it was pretty much exactly sort of posing the same question we have here, where you have a view of history that is taught from that very great man view of history, and it is very predominantly white. But then there's so many other parts of histories, for example, slaves in the Caribbean, you know, reacting against those who were enslaving them and seeking their rights, and the likes of Mary Seacole as well. And I just think if you're going to teach history, you can't just teach one particular viewpoint of history. You need to teach all aspects of history, and you need to let people come to a balanced judgment by giving them all the facts. So I do think, obviously, the approach that the government are taking at the moment with this sort of more great man view, yes, have it, but incorporate it with, you know, the history of Black people in the UK, for example. Windrush, for example, I didn't know anything about Windrush until the Windrush scandal. And then I almost had to go from that and sort of do a lot more research on sort of the impact of Black immigration into the country post-war and the massive impact that had on the culture of this country and just the way our whole country's developed. And I just think, again, if you're going to teach history, don't teach parts of it, teach all of it.
And it's not just great man, it's great white man, isn't it? It's so interesting you mentioned the Windrush generation. A whole load of people that came to the UK, they were invited here, they were celebrated and arrived as they came into Tilbury Port. And a lot of people, especially our generation, I think, didn't know their name until there was a big scandal about many of these people being, and I use inverted commas if you listen to the audio version here, sent home, these places they haven't been for many, many years. And I'm the same as you there, Cam. I live at home 20 minutes from Tilbury Port, half an hour maybe, of where all these people arrived into the UK. And I didn't know very much about it until this whole scandal came about. Well, I'm glad we've been able to have this discussion, and as we've mentioned, this chat with the women's officer, the co-ethnic minority officer at Warwick Anti-Racism Society is all available on the Raw News socials if you missed it a little bit earlier on in the show. Let's talk now about free school meals. Now, this is a campaign which is ongoing, being led by the Man U footballer Marcus Rashford, who, by the way, is my captain in my fantasy football team. Even though I'm not really a footballer, I just, you know, I did it. I joined the thingy, and I've made a captain, and that is him. And for one reason only, and it is this, because it's leading this campaign about free school meals and about really making sure kids don't go hungry during holidays. He started the campaign in early summer, late spring for the summer holidays, and said that he wanted Boris Johnson to make sure no one goes hungry over summer holidays. Boris Johnson agreed in the end after quite a lot of campaigning. And here we are talking about the half-term break, which for many UK school students starts on Monday, or I suppose it started now ahead of a week off next week. Boris Johnson doesn't seem to want to give these kids free school meals over the holidays and only during term time. Enoch, let's come to you first. Your thoughts on this all playing out? It feels like we're a bit of deja vu, because we had this similar discussion some months ago.
I don't understand what's happened. I don't know why Boris Johnson decided to pick this fight. I don't know what he thinks it gets him. I don't know why he decided he wants to headline Tories deny children food. It's absolutely absurd. I think, if I'm allowed this from an opinion as head of news, obscene that this has been allowed to happen. Because you would have assumed after they gave him the MBE that Boris Johnson's government basically accepted, all right, fine, these kids need food, we help provide it. But the fact that they gave him the MBE 1 week and literally next week they're going, well, we don't need virtue signaling footballers telling the government what to do. But apparently we do if the government can't see the basic logic of not letting children starve. I'm baffled by what's happening here.
And from a sort of purely political view, doesn't it look bad on the government? Whether they say, look, we've spent millions of pounds on corona, our national debt is rising by a huge amount, it's the highest it's been for something like 50 years. Sure, they've spent a lot of money, but actually in the grand scheme of things, it's just bad optics for them. Cam, your thoughts on this whole saga?
It's really not a good look. I think Enoch is right. It was on Question Time last night, and Nicky Morgan, I thought, gave an absolutely kind of despicable response when she was talking to Bridget Phillipson and said, oh, we might have voted this through had one of your front bench not referred to one of our MPs as scum. Of course, that was the interaction between Angela Rayner, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, and Tory MP Chris Clarkson in Parliament on Wednesday. But even still, I think I can see where the government's position is coming from here, because the government will say, well, we don't normally pay out for free school meals during holidays. It's not something that we have done before. And there is normally some sort of provision that private companies can provide during the holiday, whether that is sort of private childcare that goes on throughout the holidays. I know back home that for a fairly reasonable price, there was an ability for children to go to like day centres where they would be able to get full meals as well as have some sort of activities as well. But I do think this really raises a very important question on the whole idea of child poverty and child hunger, because I think coronavirus has really thrown a lot open at the moment, just because we've seen obviously the massive impact that we've had with unemployment, the national debt going up, and there has been I think there's no doubt that there has been a reversal of quality of life because of the pandemic. And I almost think that if the government are going to continue to persist with the restrictions that they have in place at the moment and persist with these things that are limiting people's ability to go out and work, to go out and make money, and also limit the ability of private companies to provide these services that would have provided for the children in the past, for example, by implementing the rule of six, then I do think the government have to do something. But I think Marcus Rashford, it's important he raises that point, but whether on the point of free school meals, if that is the solution, of course, it's only vouchers, it's not a definite meal provision. That money could be spent elsewhere, potentially. Now, that's a very cynical view, I know, but I think the government is saying if they're going to do it, they need to do it in a way that I think is more targeted and make sure that it is getting good quality meals and good quality, frankly, provision to children as well.
Yeah, we should at this point mention the government's defence, and I've heard this in their morning media round today, is that they're investing more into the welfare system, into benefits and into universal credit, and more money is going in there. That's what they say in response to this. It's interesting you mentioned this heated moment, really, in the House of Commons earlier this week, which was quite a moment when Angela Rayner, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, supposedly, and we sort of didn't get that bit on tape, but we accept that she says it, I think, says scum towards a Conservative MP who's talking. Now, that, as I say, that was quite the moment, but they knew which way they were going to vote, regardless of what Angela Rayner shouted from the front bench. Let's come to you, Lily, on this. What do you make of this? Have you picked a side? Are you with Boris Johnson or with Marcus Rashford?
I would say definitely Marcus Rashford. I can't say that I knew a lot about this before I moved here. I read about it when I was home, and I mean, to me, it's fascinating that it takes someone of that fame and status or success to be listened to. Like, I feel like in the situation that we are in, the idea to scrap the summer meals or to not provide meals to me was just crazy, because now more than ever, people need it. People are not doing as well. And it's just crazy to me that it took someone like that to convince them otherwise. And now to reverse that again, I also don't understand. But to me, Boris is someone who doesn't really have opinions. He just does what makes him look good. And then on the other hand, he still has to please the Conservative Party. And I don't know, I just don't understand him and his logic. So I'm definitely on Marcus's side about this one. Yeah.
That's an interesting take on it. This idea that maybe Boris Johnson just sort of goes with the wind. He, of course, is a former journalist and will, come out of all sorts of outrageous opinions just to, make people read his articles. And maybe he's doing a similar thing in governance. Cam, what do you make of that suggestion? Do you think there's sort of substance to the man leading our country?
I think there is. I think the thing with Boris Johnson at the moment, and I think this whole dilemma of free school meals, I think goes into the wider issue with the government spending at the moment, because in the government saying we have to have these measures in to stop the virus and we have to do these restrictions, so we have to put X and X and X program in, a lot of the backbenchers in the Tory party, especially, they're saying at the moment, hold on a second. But many of them don't think that we need things like the rule of six or some of these new measures, saying that this is a virus that for the vast majority, provided you shield the right people, you protect the vulnerable, for the vast majority of people isn't going to have an impact. And I think there's another point to make, which is that, and I think that Lily raises an interesting point saying right now, at this moment with the pandemic, we need to be focusing on providing people free school meals. Well, I think in general, we need to be ensuring that pandemic or not, there's provision for people to be able to have a sufficient quality of life, to be able to get sufficient food on their table, to be able to go out and do things with their families and friends. And I think just a simple voucher system, and I think this is where the party, I think certainly where the Conservative Party are having concerns, is that if you put this money in, is it going to be an efficient way to spend taxpayers' money? Or do we need a more targeted approach, for example, that doesn't do it through vouchers, but does it through community centres, for example, who the government can set up a contract with to provide these services and people can be sent to them, and it can be something run like that. I think the government's under pressure at the moment, clearly, to start to balance the books and not let the pandemic get too expensive. So I think something like this in that debate, you need to be ensuring that people are getting food on the table, but it's whether there's a more efficient way of doing it than free school meals, or indeed at the same time, I think just making sure ultimately you're not wasting taxpayers' money. I think on an aside to that, I saw this morning that taxpayers are responsible for subsidising meals in the Houses of Parliament. And I think the government can't justifiably say they're going to do that and then not go for the free school meals thing. So I think arguably spend that money on providing meals and providing provision for children to be able to get food. What I don't understand.
Okay, so this idea, and I've seen this a lot on social media. I've seen this, in fact, on the front page of, I think, the Daily Star this morning in local community groups, that MPs, members of Parliament, House of Lords people, everyone like that gets these subsidised meals. Now, here's the truth, that yes, they are fairly cheap, these meals, but this idea that they're subsidised actually isn't the case. What it is the staff are paid and everything to make them and to serve them, but it's a not-for-profit, so that's why the costs are low. In a similar way, let's bring this back to Warwick. I went to this, completely off topic, but it's the style of the Johnny Jenkins show. I went to this base camp. Have you seen this big tent on the piazza?
I went.
Oh, what was your thoughts, Enoch?
Well, it seems nice enough. It has a TikTok making corner, which sort of confused me. But it seemed like a nice enough place to while away an afternoon. So I don't know. I don't mind it.
The reason I bring it up is because they have this coffee van, and it's a high street coffee brand chain that you'll know, and the coffee is so cheap. That every coffee, and this isn't some sort of advert, I just think it's a bargain, and it's in your interest to know about a bargain. They have this coffee van where every coffee they do from a high street chain is £1. 1 Great British pound, because they're not making profit from it in the same. I asked them all about it. In the way they're not making profit from it in the same way. You see where I'm going with this, Cam? That the meals in the House of Commons, they don't make profit from either. So yeah, I mean that's where I'm going for my coffee now. This base camp thing. It's not very busy though, so people need to get out there. Maybe the JJ viewers can do that for us. I think this Marcus Rashford and Boris Johnson story is going to go on, because even though it's half term about now, we're soon going to be talking about the Christmas holidays, aren't we, in December? And are they going to get the food over the course of that 2 weeks? And boy, oh boy, is Christmas going to look very different this year. But I think that's the discussion for another day. Let's talk about regional coronavirus lockdowns. More and more places are under restrictions. Yesterday, we learned that Coventry, where the Warwick is based, Slough and Stoke-on-Trent go into tier 2 restrictions. We've seen, I think it's Warrington in Cheshire going into tier 3. Nottinghamshire, where some of the highest COVID rates are in the country, is in negotiations, and we think to go to tier 3 this afternoon. The message here is more and more places are being put under restrictions. So Cam and Enoch and I in Leamington Spa at the moment. I'm right in saying that. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So we're in the Warwickshire area, which means we're in tier 1. We're not under new restrictions. But Lily, I assume right now you're on campus, and that puts you in Coventry. So new restrictions coming in over the weekend. I'm interested, not to put you on the spot here, but I'm interested to see what's been communicated to you. What is your understanding of these new measures?
Honestly, the only notification that we got is that we're changing tiers to tier 2. And all it said is this does not change anything about teaching. That's all they said. So I'm assuming I'm just going to act the same that I was acting before, go out with 6 people maximum, or including myself. And yeah, I mean, they didn't really say that you can't. I mean, I don't know if the rule is that technically you're not allowed to be inside with people from a different accommodation, but I'm not sure how they would know that, because we're all University of Warwick. So if I go to Coventry to eat something, how would they know? You know what I mean? So
yeah,
nothing to me is that different, I think, like from what I understand.
Well, this is it. The restrictions on London, Birmingham, all different places in these tier 2 is that you can't mix with other households or bubble indoors. So be that in a house, be that in a cafe, a restaurant, whatever, you can't do that indoors. But universities are exempt from this, which means you know, your seminars, everything will still be the same. But the sticking point that I'm not clear on is, are university outlets, the Dirty Duck, for example, I was there last night, is that part of the university and so exempt from meeting other households, or is that treated then as a hospitality and social venue and you can't mix? Not clear yet. Warwick sent a notification through the app. I wasn't much clearer after reading that, but that comes in over the weekend, so it'll be interesting to see how that affects Coventry as a city. We know, of course, there's another university in Coventry, and maybe they play a role in this too. But really, Lily, we're seeing more and more places being put under restrictions in the UK. I think I'm right in saying it's more than half now as we go into the weekend of the UK under some sort of restriction. Do you think it's now time to say, right, let's shut shop for a few weeks and have a lockdown?
That's a hard question for me to answer, because I never was in lockdown in Germany. They didn't ever do that. I know that it is effective. And this whole tier system is a bit confusing. And if everyone's in tier 3, why not basically lock it down anyway? I can't say that I have the expertise to know what the right decision would be. Maybe it would be. I, of course, as a student, would not enjoy that, but I think it's very possibly a good idea. It could be useful for everyone, but I wouldn't want one. But I understand if they would do it, you know.
Yeah, no one really wants a lockdown, but how about this idea? If you shield those that are a bit older, those who are a bit more vulnerable, and you know, you put them in maybe a lockdown, or give them some more restrictions, and younger people or healthy people can just go and live their lives. Is that something that appeals to you? Because you came to university, lived your life, and then you got COVID.
Yeah, but I'd say it's like in a bubble, because like I'm only hanging out with people from the university. I know that, I mean, we've been told that, I think last week, 2,000 were in isolation at once. So it was like a lot of people at once. But I'm not really going to see anyone who's not from the university. So I don't really see it like as that I'm posing as much of a risk to people from outside of the university, unless I would go to Leamington every day and go to different bars every day, then I would be putting them at risk. But I haven't been doing that as much or really at all. And therefore, I feel like I got it now. And I think that these first few weeks we're going to show that people are going to get it. And then hopefully after that, it'll like calm down, settle down. And if we mingle with each other here, then technically I feel like we should be in our own social bubble. Yeah.
It depends how big the bubble gets, of course. And then when people start going home and that extends as we're going to Reading Week in a couple of weeks' time. Enoch, looking at this, obviously you're from London. London's in lockdown. We knew that at this time last week, didn't we? And now Coventry is in other parts of the UK. Do you think now the argument is pretty clear that we need a national lockdown?
Well, actually, I spoke about this to the BBC earlier, and you can read the article now on our BBC website.
Oh,
I think we are now looking at a situation where a national lockdown, if not soon to be coming, is now necessary. The government's test and tracing is failing. It's not in the numbers it needs to reach. People aren't reporting themselves enough. People aren't quarantining enough. We need an opportunity to do a quick reset, build up the strength we need, so after the lockdown we can actually have a successful test and trace system and start mitigating some of these deaths and some of these cases.
Look, here you are on the BBC website, and it's basically an article about you, Enoch. COVID-19. You can read this on bbc.co.uk. COVID-19, students terrified by rising rates. Enoch Mukungu, University of Warwick student, age 19, said he'd witnessed some students flouting the rules on restrictions, but that he knew far more people who are staying at home terrified. Now, that's an interesting take, Enoch. Some are so worried. I'm reading this to you, but I think it's quite exciting. Some are so worried they're not leaving the house. The second-year history and politics student said, I've seen many people get really ill with the virus, and so more and more and taking it more seriously now. How interesting to see you there on the BBC website, Enoch. I love that. And that's an interesting take, Cam. Hearing our BBC star here, Enoch, take on students and lockdown restrictions and everything, he's saying there's more people terrified at home than there are going out and being selfish. What do you think?
Well, I know people on both sides of the scale. That's the thing. I know some people who have, who are extremely scared of the virus, are taking precautions, some of whom aren't leaving the house. I know some people who are very blasé about it and almost treat social distancing and wearing face masks as almost like a myth almost. I mean, certainly I think I'm always of the opinion that I think lockdowns are a bad decision. And I think we've got to the stage now where any sort of lockdown action is potentially going to be worse than the disease itself because of the indirect impacts. I see why people are saying that we need a lockdown. And if the hospital capacity gets overwhelmed, then I would support some sort of measures, because the point of a lockdown, you can't suppress the virus. The virus is still going to spread. A lockdown's not going to technically stop transmission. It's just going to delay it. And so all you can do by delaying is just making sure that you are flattening that peak. And so everyone who needs treatment gets treatment. But we started to see, I saw an ITV news report this week about the effect of COVID lockdowns on cancer patients. And there was a cancer patient who was, I believe, in the 4th stage of his cancer. He was responding to this chemo treatment and this really revolutionary treatment. And in March, he was told he can have this operation and it would save his cancer and eventually allow him to become cancer-free. It got cancelled, and now his cancer's terminal. And that is the sort of story that I think, in all this talk about coronavirus deaths, we're forgetting the indirect impact that this will have, whether that's on cancer patients, whether that's on heart patients, stroke patients, and not just hospitals as well, but in the economy, mass unemployment. The hospitality sector has already gone through one lockdown this year. It will be brought to its knees by any more restrictions.
It's all about balancing it, isn't it, Cam? That's what it comes down to in the end. I said we'd talk about Brexit. No time for that today. We'll get onto it next week, and maybe we'll talk in the context of having a Brexit deal. But I want to finish. I'm still on Enoch's BBC fame. Now, someone has replied to the tweet, Enoch. Students are terrified. Part of the rise started with irresponsible students having parties, regretting it now maybe. Obviously not entirely to blame, but definitely partly. I'll leave that thought there. And I think that is a thought that many people have about students, and maybe we'll get into that more in another day. Enoch, we can read your article on the BBC News website.
Yeah, yes, you can, and it's in the comment section if you want to find it. So
yeah, if you're watching on Facebook, it's there. If not, just search for sort of students and BBC, and I'm sure you'll find it. Well, panel, thanks ever so much, all of you, for coming on. I really enjoyed chatting to you today.
They're great to come on. Thanks very much.
Great show.
So that's Cam, Lily and Enoch with me today. And thanks also to my Black History Month special panel earlier on, the people from the SU and then from Warwick Anti-Racism Society. That's all for today. The time 4 o'clock if you're with us live.